feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
The Wizard of Oz is an iconic 1939 American musical fantasy film that is estimated to be the most watched film of all time. The movie stars Judy Garland as Dorothy Gale, a teenager living on a Kansas farm owned by her Uncle Henry and Aunt Em. She is also friends with three farmhands, Hunk, played by Ray Bolger, Zeke, played by Bert Lahr, and Hickory, played by Jack Haley. When Dorothy's dog Toto bites the wealthy Elmira Gulch, played by Margaret Hamilton, she allegedly obtains a sheriff's order authorizing her to seize the dog to be destroyed.
Here's what I'm taking him in, so he can't attack me again.
No, I won't let you take him. You go away. I'll bite you myself.
Dorothy!
You wicked old witch.
Toto soon escapes and returns to Dorothy, who decides to run away from home to protect him. While on the run, she comes across a charlatan fortune teller named Professor Marvel, played by actor Frank Morgan.
Please, Professor, why can't we go with you and see all the crown heads of Europe?
Do you know any? Oh, you mean the thing. Yes, I never do anything without consulting my crystal first.
He cons Dorothy into going back home to her family.
Oh, I've got to go home right away.
But what's this? I thought you were going along with me.
Oh, no, I have to get to her right away.
Huh?
Come on, Toto. Come on.
Poor little kid. I hope she gets home all right.
As she is returning home to the farm, a violent thunderstorm spawns a tornado.
It's a twister! It's a twister!
Henry, I can't find Dorothy. She's somewhere around the door.
Guys, we can't look for her now! Come on, get in the center, hurry up!
Unable to get into the locked storm shelter, Dorothy walks back into the house and is knocked unconscious by a blown-out window pane. The house is then sucked up inside the tornado. The house then lands on the ground, and Dorothy finds herself in a bright and technicolor-filled otherworldly place.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Dorothy is soon greeted by Glinda, the Good Witch of the South, played by Billy Burke. Glinda informs Dorothy that she is in Munchkin Land in the Land of Oz.
And there's the house, and here you are, and that's all that's left of the Wicked Witch of the East.
The Munchkins are very pleased to see her because the house landed on the Wicked Witch of the East, killing her. Her sister, the Wicked Witch of the West, played again by Margaret Hamilton, soon arrives to seize her deceased sister's powerful and magical ruby slippers. Before she can claim them, Glinda magically transports them on Dorothy's feet. With no power in Munchkin Land, the Wicked Witch leaves in a puff of smoke with a warning to Dorothy.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
Glinda tells Dorothy that only one person may help her return home to Kansas, the great and mysterious Wizard of Oz. She directs Dorothy to follow the yellow brick road to the Emerald City and see the wizard himself. Along the way, she meets the Scarecrow, played again by Ray Bolger, who wants a brain.
I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. And my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
The Tin Man, played again by Jack Haley, who wants a heart.
When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart.
And the Cowardly Lion, played again by Bert Lahr, who just wants some courage.
Yeah, it's sad, believe me, missy, when you're born to be a sissy without the vim and vibe. But I could show my prowess, be a lion, not a mouse, if I only had the nerve.
All four of them, along with Toto, head off to see the wizard in the hopes that he can fulfill their wishes. Upon its release in August of 1939, this movie grossed a worldwide total of just over $3 million. With all of the costs of marketing, distribution, and production, it was actually somewhat of a box office flop at the time. Despite the initial lukewarm box office gross, The Wizard of Oz was greeted with widespread acclaim by critics. The film is included on film critic Roger Ebert's Great Movies list. The film was an adaptation of L. Frank Baum's 1900 children's novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It was widely believed that L. Frank Baum based The Wizard of Oz on Republican President William McKinley of Ohio. President McKinley was often called a wizard for his political skills. Others have said that perhaps the Scarecrow was an allegory of American farmers and all their troubles during the late 19th century, and that the Tin Man was an allegory of the American steel industry and their failures to combat international competition around the turn of the century. None of this has ever been substantiated and just makes for fascinating discussions about the possible allegories of the story. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is, in the words of the Library of Congress, America's greatest and best-loved homegrown fairy tale. There were 3 actresses considered for the role of Dorothy Gale: Shirley Temple, Deanna Durbin, and Judy Garland. Judy Garland had to wear a corset-style device around her torso. That way she would appear younger and more flat-chested playing Dorothy. She originally wore a blonde wig and heavy baby doll makeup before the filmmakers decided to have her look more natural. The scene where Dorothy falls into the pig pen and the scene where she opens the door to enter Oz were played by Judy Garland's double, actress Bobby Cochet. Bobby Cochet was a champion swimmer and a member of the 1928 U.S. Olympic team. Second billing actually went to actor Frank Morgan as the Wizard of Oz, and the part had originally been intended for actor W.C. Fields. The horses in the Emerald City scene were colored with gelatin powder, but the scenes had to be shot very quickly because they started to lick it off. Actress Gail Sondergaard was originally cast as the Wicked Witch, but she withdrew from the role when the witch's persona was changed from glamorous to mean. The role was then given to actress Margaret Hamilton. During the filming of one sequence, when the witch leaves Munchkinland in a burst of smoke and flames, the fire burst too soon, setting Margaret Hamilton's green copper-based face paint on fire. She received third-degree burns to her hands and face and spent months recuperating before coming back to work. Hamilton's copper-based makeup was so toxic that she could only have a liquid diet through a straw on filming days, and her skin had a green tinge to it that lasted for months after production had wrapped. There were plenty of health hazards on the set. The snow used in the opium scene in the poppy field was made from 100% industrial-grade asbestos. Margaret Hamilton reprised her role as the Wicked Witch in a 1976 episode of Sesame Street.
And as for you, my fine feathered friend, how would you like to be turned into one of these?
She's gone! Wow! Gee whiz!
Following the airing, the show's producers received letters from parents saying that it was too frightening for children. It was ultimately decided that the episode not be aired again, and it was banned for over 40 years. After being left out of home video releases and streaming options, the episode was considered lost forever until the year 2022, when it appeared on the internet after being shown to researchers from the American Archive of Public Broadcasting.
Glorious, glorious! Back to Oz where I belong!
Ray Bolger was originally cast as the Tin Man, and Buddy Epson was cast to play the Scarecrow. Bolger wanted to play the Scarecrow himself, and Epson did not object in switching roles. 10 days into the shoot, Buddy Epson suffered a toxic reaction after repeatedly inhaling the aluminum dust in the aluminum powder makeup he wore for the role of the Tin Man. He was hospitalized in critical condition and was subsequently forced to leave the project. Jack Haley ended up replacing Buddy Epson in that role. The makeup used for Haley was quietly changed to an aluminum paste with a layer of clown white grease paint underneath in order to protect his skin. Buddy Epson had already recorded his rendition of If I Only Had a Heart, which sounds much different than Jack Haley's Bostonian accent version.
Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart.
Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart.
During the Tin Man's rendition of If I Only Had a Heart, the girl who sings the line,
Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
is Adriana Caselotti, the voice of Snow White in Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She was paid $1,000 for singing that line. By comparison, Toto was paid $125 a week. The Munchkins were paid $50 per week. They were paid less than a dog. Some of the Munchkins were played by a German group named the Singer Midgets, a popular entertainment troupe and vaudeville act. Many of them were Jewish. Coming to America to film The Wizard of Oz, they escaped almost certain death from the Third Reich. It would be quite the opposite 3 decades later, when another fantasy film called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was filmed in Germany. While looking for short actors to play Oompa Loompas, filmmakers would come to discover that many of them had been exterminated during World War II. Judy Garland's iconic rendition of Harold Arlen and E.Y. Harburg's Over the Rainbow won the film an Academy Award for Best Original Song, and Over the Rainbow was selected in 2017 by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Recording Registry. The Recording Industry Association of America and the National Endowment for the Arts selected Over the Rainbow as the #1 song of the 20th century. This film started to become a cultural phenomenon following its first television broadcast on November 3, 1956 on CBS. Aired as part of Ford Star Jubilee and hosted by Bert Lahr and a then 10-year-old Liza Minnelli, the ratings were massive. Over 45 million Americans viewed the telecast, which was aired in color, although in 1956, most Americans only had black and white television sets. The actual color of the film during the Kansas scenes is not black and white, but rather sepia. The 1959 CBS broadcast, hosted by Red Skelton, had even higher ratings. And with the exception of 1963, this movie would air every subsequent year until 1967 on CBS, and then on NBC from 1968 until 1975. Starting again in 1976, the annual broadcast returned to CBS, where it would air every single year until 1998. I first saw it as a little kid during a 1993 CBS broadcast, which my family had recorded on a VHS tape for years. It would then air on cable throughout the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s, and on and on and on. The Cowardly Lion's Bert Lahr was warned to be careful because Hollywood had a history of typecasting actors. His response was, "Yeah, but how many parts are there for lions?" The Tin Man's Jack Haley would have a son named Jack Haley Jr. Jack Haley Jr. would go on to marry Judy Garland's daughter Liza Minnelli during the 1970s. Ray Bolger was asked if after all the times he played the Scarecrow on all those network telecasts of Wizard of Oz, if he had ever received any residuals. Bolger replied, "No, just immortality, and I'll settle for that." Due to its sudden popularity following television airings, it became the most seen film in movie history. In 1989, it was selected as one of the first 25 movies to be chosen by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry for being culturally, aesthetically, and historically significant to American history. In 1995, it was selected by the Vatican in the art category of the Vatican's list of 45 great films. It is one of the very few films to be entered into the United Nations Memory of the World Register to safeguard the Wizard of Oz against collective amnesia, neglect, decay, or destruction, to preserve it for the future of humanity. That's pretty big for a movie. The Wizard of Oz is a remarkable work of art, iconic, beautiful, and one of the greatest motion pictures in all of history.
There's no place like home.